Well, it seems America is falling apart. The American Society of Civil Engineers released their U.S. infrastructure report card today and gave the country a D+ grade. That's according to the organization's analysis. Over the last 4 years, there's been nearly no improvement in most of the 16 categories they look at. Kris Van Cleave spoke with the organization's president about the dismal report.
We rely on our infrastructure and it keeps us safe. We'd like to think and hope that we can still rely on it. But with deferred maintenance, with not putting money in investing in our infrastructure, we're putting our safety at risk. Do we have to wait until something breaks before we throw money at it? Because you pay 4 times more to fix something that's broken.
CBS News transportation correspondent Kris Van Cleave joins us from Washington. Kris, I got to use one of the president's words that he likes to use when looking at this report card: sad. These 16 categories, I mean, I'm looking here: aviation, road, dams, drinking water remain unchanged with a D. That's pretty scary.
It's not good. It's certainly not a report card you would want your kids to bring home, from school. It is. And it really remarkable how little has changed. On one hand, it means that at least things haven't gotten worse over the last 4 years in most cases, but not a lot's gotten better. Rail was really the only thing that made a notable improvement. Rail going from like a C+ to a B,
right?
Largely because of the investment of private freight railroads in their infrastructure that they own. The report still says there are concerns about the aging infrastructure of passenger rail. And, we know from our coverage of the Amtrak crash and the New Jersey Transit accident, where rail lines have been dragging their feet installing positive train control, that there is more work to be done on the rails, just like there are on the roads and the bridges and the airports and the inland waterways and the ports and the dams. And, pick one and you're going to find there's more work to be done.
Now, President Trump has called for massive spending on infrastructure projects. It says here the 2017 report card highlights the fact that there is a need for greater investment, but it's to the tune of $2 trillion.
That's right. They say that there, in addition to the infrastructure spending that goes on now, they say by 2025 there needs to be an additional $2 trillion of infrastructure spending in order to keep pace and get things to maybe to a B grade. We're not talking about the A's here. We're just talking about sort of maintaining what we're used to. And essentially, the report argues that the current generation has taken a generation off, that we're relying on infrastructure that was built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and haven't done a whole lot since then to keep up, maintain, or grow infrastructure in the United States. And when it comes down to it, that's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar, many-year investment to try to address. And there are questions, of course, as to what the $1 trillion the Trump administration has spoke of will actually look like, and what kind of projects can be done with that money. There's a lot of talk about public-private partnerships, and those work really well for some types of infrastructure, but say fixing Flint's water system, probably not one where a private company wants to come in because there's not a lot of money that can be made there. So the devil will be in the details of the Trump plan, and that's probably a year away before we see it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Kris, and I wonder if, in speaking to your sources, they've commented on this, because it seems obviously in some areas the United States is leading the way around the world, for example, in developing the information superhighway. But when it comes to the actual physical highways, the things that we've been relying on for many years, is it a question of just not paying attention and thinking that these things would last much longer than they have? Or is it really that we've sort of dropped the ball, we've taken our eye off the target and not invested in these infrastructure projects, and that's why they're crumbling?
I think there's a lot of blame pointed at Congress. There's been just hasn't been a willingness to spend money on infrastructure, to invest, to spend more. The Highway Trust Fund, we know, is not in good financial shape. There's been a refusal to look at raising the gas tax, which is simple. Basically how the Highway Trust Fund is funded. And there's been a real reticence on the part of Congress for at least a decade now, probably longer, to find ways to spend additional money on infrastructure. Now, when money does get spent, it's after an accident. After I-35 in Minnesota collapsed, there was money spent. After Amtrak, there was money kicked into positive train control. but trying to do repairs after the fact is many times more expensive than just fixing the problem before it's a problem. And what you end up seeing is, take California. They had a really strong, brutal winter that was a lot of rain, a lot of snow, and that has impacted their crumbling infrastructure. Their aging infrastructure didn't weather that storm well, and that's now an extra $1 billion of repairs to dams, roads, and bridges for a state that already has some of the worst roads in the country and was struggling with how to fix them.
It's an incredible report, great reporting, Kris Van Cleave. I mean, just for our viewers, I mean, you're right. The highest grade that we got on this report card is rail. As you pointed out, Kris, went from a C+ to a B. Everything else is D's and C's. Certainly not a report card that you want to bring home to mom and dad, and let alone the American people. Yes, we should ground whoever's responsible for this. Kris Van Cleave, thank you very much.
Sure thing, Vlad.